Before I start, thank you so much for giving me the only t-shirt that could make these trainers sane. So thank you for that. It's great to be with you. I'd like to start by asking you what should be a very simple question. What is of most value to you? Just reflect on it for a second. What is of most value to you? Got it? Okay, keep that with you. So it's the summer of 2008. It's Saturday morning, it's 7:30, and I get a phone call from Gib's mum. This is Gib here. He's my best mate from uni. As you can see, he's got a pretty mischievous grin, and it's normally for a good reason. There's normally some mischief behind there. And so when his mum called me at 7:30 on a Saturday morning, I thought, here we go. And she told me Gib is in a hospice. He's got a brain tumour and he's got about 2 or 3 days left to live. Would you like to come and see him? Yes, that's an invitation. So I bought the ticket to go up north to see him in Bradford. And his long floppy locks were no more. He's kind of shaved head and tubes everywhere, and he still had that mischievous glint in his eye. And he couldn't speak, but he didn't need to. And we just looked at each other for about 20 minutes. And he used that time towards the end to give me a smile. That was his response, to smile. I whispered in his ear, "I love you," and I left. And a couple of days later, I just knew. It was really weird. I was in a pub and in London with some workmates, and I just knew that he'd gone. And as weird as it might sound, but I don't think it will with you guys. And I don't think it would to Jack if he was still with us when reflecting on his brother. That moment, that ending, was one of the most precious and valuable gifts in my life. It was transformative. Tom Stoppard said that every exit is an entry somewhere else. And I've still got a relationship with Gib. He's a bit further up north than he used to be, granted, but I can still call upon him whenever I like and still be inspired with him. Now, this is a startup event. Why am I talking about death and dying and ending? Well, I'd like you to think about, just conjure up the idea of the ending of your startup, because there is no startup without an ending. I'd like you to think about it, not in a morbid way full of darkness, but as a way that could be filled with beauty, inspiration, and an invitation to shine. So what might that look like? What does a happy exit look like? And after all, we're all going to exit. Let's not be British about the whole thing. We're all going to exit from here, having made some friends, and it will be tough, but we're going to exit. We're going to exit from our companies and our startups. We're going to exit from our relationships, even the most loving relationships that we have. And yes, we're going to exit from this life as well. So I'd like you to think about this, not as something that is negative and dismal and dark, but a sacred opportunity. Over the last 10 years, I've worked with some incredible people. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Desmond Tutu, Nobel laureates, a 14-year-old environmentalist called Felix Finkbeiner. And just from his name, you know he's a superhero, don't you? You just know he's a superhero. But the person who most inspired me in the last decade was a guy called John, who worked at the post office. And he was just a dude. And there's a lot of dudes and dudettes here. So we just got on really well. We'd only met each other once. And he said to me, "Simon, a couple of weeks ago, my mum passed away. And she said to me on her deathbed, 'Son, I don't think she probably sounded quite like that. She said, son, there are 3 types of people in this world. There are adders, subtractors, and multipliers. Now, the adders, whenever you're with them, you feel energized, added to. Like your soul smiles a bit with every encounter. Then there are the subtractors. They might be a colleague, a sibling. They probably come to mind. And it's as though to add to their own energy, they take something from you. You feel diminished, less, somehow. And then there are multipliers. And these might be people like John that you just meet once in your life or at a happy startup camp. Or if you're really, really lucky, you might be married to one. Or they might be your technology co-founder. And they set off something disproportionate in you. Your life, your work will never be the same again. The multiplier effect, a catalytic effect. Now, what struck me when I really heard this story, because when John told me this story, I thought, oh, who are the subtractors in my life? God, straight away I was thinking, who are the subtractors and the adders in my life? But then I realized that the real wisdom of John's mum and her exit strategy for life was not to think about who John or other people were to her, but how she could use that moment, that exit, to be a multiplier in someone else's life. To plant a seed of inspiration that would germinate in John's life beyond her and in all of the lives that John would touch afterwards. The multiplier effect. And so a happy exit is one that multiplies value. That thing that you said was the most valuable, that came to your mind, the most valuable thing in your life. A happy exit is one that multiplies value, not just financial value, because financial value is just one tiny piece in the mosaic of value. There's all kinds of other things, and I'd be surprised if too many of you had a thing that came to mind when I asked you what's of most value in your life. But what does this mean when we're leaving our companies? Well, in 2003, my startup, when I was 24, so past it, I'm afraid, was Global Tolerance. And Global Tolerance is an international communications agency that I set up to spread messages of hope. I was pretty pissed off with my own professional conduct, my lack of ethics. I was taking the mickey with my expense accounts. I was selling stuff to people that they didn't need. I was getting awards and lots of societal plaudits of success, but I didn't feel successful, I didn't feel happy, and I didn't feel that value. So I set up Global Tolerance partly as a personal expedition to buy back some of my soul and to give myself and my colleagues permission to be human, but also to balance the media coverage of different cultures and faiths and social initiatives. And it was an amazing journey. And just to give you an idea of some of the things that we did, do you all aware of the Jedi Knights story? In 2001, for the first time in the British census, people were asked what their religion was. And some students, I think, in their inimitable wisdom, you're smiling, I feel like you were probably behind it actually hearing you speak before, in their inimitable wisdom thought, let's put Jedi Knights as a religion. And if we can get 10,000 signatures, then the British government will have to say that Jedi Knights is an official religion. Let's do that. Does anyone know how many Jedi Knights there are in the UK? Just a guess.
100,000.
Higher?
Million.
Not quite. There's 390,000 Jedi Knights in the UK. Jedi Knights is the 4th largest religion in the UK. And I can feel the force in this room, by the way, and it's significant. So we're a communications and PR agency, and a values-based one at that. And I was fed up with when I said, I'm founder of Global Tolerance. Oh, tolerance, I've got yeast intolerance, and tolerance is just putting up with people. And tolerance, Okay, so there wasn't a huge amount of enthusiasm about this word. I get that. So I wanted to do something, I wanted our organisation to do something that would begin to shift the conversation around this word and this idea, this virtue. So on the 16th of November 2007, the United Nations International Day of Tolerance, Yanyan and Umada, two Jedi Knights who met at Jedi Junior School in Andromeda, marched on the United Nations with their 7'5" Wookiee friend Chewbacca to demand that the UN change the day to the United Nations Interstellar Day of Tolerance to reflect the religious beliefs of their brothers and sisters in Britain and across the galaxy. 4 hours later, at the official UN press briefing in New York, Kofi Annan's spokesman was asked to recognise Jedi as an official religion. The campaign reached 700 million people. Every national newspaper in the UK covered it. CNN did a big feature about how to start your own religion. And whether or not it was coincidence or not, Tony Blair, who was Prime Minister at the time, a week after started a big immigration speech with tolerance is what makes Britain. The Queen mentioned tolerance 3 times 2 weeks later in her Christmas Day speech as well. So whether or not this was as a result, I'd like to think that part of our work was about creating the environment in which we can talk about the value of values and changing the conversation about values. Something else that we did around the value of values was working on the launch of the first United Nations International Day of Happiness. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Happy Heroes campaign, and this was based upon the research that the best thing that I can do for my own happiness is to focus on your happiness, or to focus on your happiness. So we asked people to think of who their happy heroes were. This was with Action for Happiness. And we had these gold medals. And the idea was that these gold medals, we did a big launch in the House of Lords, these gold medals, I would pass my happy hero medal to the person that I felt contributed to the most amount of happiness in mine and other people's lives. And they had 24 hours to give it away. And it was remarkable and gained a lot of coverage. So here I was on this amazing journey. The company was doing well, we were growing, and the profit margins were going up. We had 7 full-time people, 75 consultants in 25 countries, a preeminent board of advisors, all was great. But we were investing in this, and working in this area of happiness and well-being. And one of the people that we worked with was this guy, Raj Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi's grandson. Amazing man, a senator, a former senator, journalist, and peace activist. And his grandfather said that happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony. What you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony. And what we've been saying as an organisation for 10 years is that we're a values-driven organisation. All of you in your startups, if you're here for the right reasons, will have values at the core of your brand identity, of who you are, what makes you you. And so when I decided that I needed to exit the company, I knew that it needed to be in harmony with what we were saying, because I wouldn't be able to look at myself in the mirror otherwise. And the reason why I needed to leave was because I just became a dad. Are there any other parents here? So I don't know about you, but for me, when I had a baby, it was the closest thing that I'd experienced to the meaning of life. I was like, oh, that's what it's about. Okay. All of that loss and love and jobs and breakups and trials and tribulations, all about passing that on to my daughter, to my children. And she's a mindfulness master, masquerading as a dribbling fool, little Seren. She's incredible. She's absolutely incredible in terms of what it means to be present. And I was thinking about what my responsibility is for my daughter. And people say, your child. But for those parents, you'll understand, she doesn't feel like my child at all. She's herself. I don't have a sense of ownership. I have a sense of responsibility, of stewardship. And I realized that I don't feel like I own global tolerance, you'd have to be some strange breed of egomaniac to say you own global tolerance. Do you really own your startups? Or if these values are right at their core, do you have that sense of stewardship, of responsibility? Now, in 18 years' time, or 21 years' time, or however many time, I might be like my mum was with me, crying at the university gates as I see little Seren go off on that particular rite of passage, and I will have to let go. I will have to let go, because the more I try to control her, the less likely she'll have a chance of succeeding. One of the things that Global Tolerance did was I put the whole company on a one-year sabbatical to coincide with becoming a father, so I could be at home with the baby. And during that sabbatical year, Nelson Mandela passed away. And because I had plenty of time to reflect on these things, one of the things I reflected upon was the legacy of Mandela's leadership. And one of the many ways in which Mandela defied conventional wisdom was to step down after a single term. You know, completely against the tide of so-called leadership in that region, he stepped down after one term. And the reason why he did that is because he recognized and realized that South Africa, the brand, your startup, was bigger than any individual. Bigger than any individual. And his responsibility as a parent, as a steward, as a guardian, was to let go. So this is some of the influences that came to my decision to leave Global Tolerance. But I wanted to do it in a way that multiplied value. So what are the options out there? Well, if you fast forward to a few years' time, we've heard, you know, you can get 3 years of profit, get your graph up, and you can sell it on. Mergers and acquisitions are a broken system. 75% of mergers and acquisitions fail. They fail. So putting your life's work, your values, your vision, your blood, sweat, and tears into a strategy that only succeeds 1 in 4 times is probably not the wisest move. And what happens in mergers and acquisitions? So, you know, I'd be fascinated to find out what happened when Facebook bought that tech startup and Twitter bought the other startup. What happened to the vision and values of those startups? What happened to them? And the entrepreneur's bank balance may well have bulged. Did they feel enriched as a result when they see their life's work being ripped apart? I've met so many entrepreneurs who have sold, and in my view, unfortunately, sold out unwittingly, because that was the only option there. Mergers and acquisitions, that's how one exits. And they've got 10 million. One guy, $254 million he sold his organization for. Didn't feel happier as a result because his organization's values and vision, which he still believed in, got torn apart. So the system was broken. So I decided, why not give it away? Give away the company. And not as an act of philanthropy, but because I'd been working like you in the field of happiness and well-being. That if I want to be happy, then the best thing I can do is focus on your happiness. Winston Churchill said, you make a living by what you get, you make a life by what you give. And we're all in the making a life business, right? All too often we confuse making a living as the ends rather than the means. The ends is the life. So what was the best enlightened, self-interested approach to seeing the vision and values that I believed in so much? And yes, the company was valued at about £1 million, but the values of being in harmony with thoughts, words, and deeds, the value of seeing an exit that lived up to that smile of Gib, that lived up to the leadership legacy of Mandela. What are those things worth to see your blood, sweat, and tears live on beyond you? So I designed a new exit strategy called an open leadership exercise, and it's a template that I hope that you will consider when you exit your own organizations. And I'm afraid it is a when rather than an if. An open leadership exercise takes an open source approach to exiting your organization. So it's open to people within the organization and outside the organization as well. At the end of the exit, you hand over 95% of the equity of the company. In my case, £10,000 cash in the bank as well, and all of the company assets. And I launched this in March this year, to the consternation of the bank and accountants and other short-term profit-driven folk. And a couple of hundred people from 30 countries applied, including the head of gunnery for a national army applied to lead and own global tolerance. And he said, because one of the questions in the second stage of the process was, white poppies are a symbol for peace. What symbol would you be? He was like, I would be a lotus flower. And I would sit in between two worlds, and the universe would shine luminous on and I was like, my God, you're the head of gunnery for a national army. So it attracted all kinds of people, but a couple of siblings in Australia, teenage siblings who thought, yeah, we could own a company. So it sparked this entrepreneurial fire within so many people around the world. So it's a 5-stage process. The first stage was a tweet about what does leadership mean to you? And a response to the question, why global tolerance, however you wish to respond to it. So over 200 applied for that. Then that was whittled down to 65 people. And those 65 people had to respond to the online application form, which was lots of CV-related questions. But not just CV-related questions, because if you're going to hand over your baby, your project, your startup, the design, and we've heard a lot about design today, the design of that process to try and filter out the people with the wrong motivations and attract the right people was key. So we had 65 people for the online application forms, then 25 people for 15-minute Skype video interviews, and then 12 people submitted executive summary business plans, and then the final was held on a boat in London, where 4 people were competing against each other, and I had a board with me as well. And what happened was that in the spirit of the process, 2 of the competing finalists, they seemed to really riff off each other. So my advisors and I, we asked them if they'd collaborate. It was more of a kind of Simon Cowell rather than Simon Cohen moment. It was, as solo artists, I'm not so sure, but together, you could be amazing. What do you think? And so they did. They formed this duet, and now global tolerance is a bad no. And so they shared 47.5% equity each. And as of now, these 2 ladies, Noah Gaffney, who was a digital strategist at the World Economic Forum, and Rosie Waring, who was a PR director at an ethical PR agency, are now the co-owners and managing directors of Global Tolerance. I own 5%. I'm on the non-executive boards on a voluntary basis for a period of a year to make sure it's a responsible transition. And they own all the company assets. And it has been the most enriching experience of my life. What's of most value to you? That vision and values at the point of exit. The thing that was of most value to me wasn't the £1 million in the bank potentially. It was because I believed in my company. I believed in the mission. We've heard a lot about the mission, those 1,000 days. I had treble that of work, of blood, sweat and tears. I wanted to see that live on beyond me. So now I've got 2 hungry, amazing, inspirational ladies, and I love the fact that they're ladies, though that's incidental, leading and owning Global Tolerance. And who knows, in 10 years' time, they might hand over the baton to another entrepreneur or other entrepreneurs. So it's a little bit early to say whether or not this is an exit strategy or a happy exit that will multiply, continue to multiply value. But so far, so good. And I've been approached by other entrepreneurs who also believe in their vision and the values of their companies, but still want to leave for whether it's personal reasons like having babies. I want to have 3 in the next 1,000 days, by the way. Or whether or not it's for other reasons like burnout. For whatever reason they want to leave, we're now discussing about how they can iterate this open leadership exercise for their own circumstances. So I'd like you to think about your exit. I'd like to think about your exit from this event, from your work, from your relationships, and even from this life. And I'd like you to think about it not in terms of darkness and morbidity, but as an invitation to shine so brightly, so luminously, that it's in harmony with the thoughts, words, and deeds that characterize that whole relationship, like Gib did with his cheeky smile, like John the postman's mum. Using that opportunity of exit, not as a way of marring and tarring a relationship just for a quick buck, but holding on to that response of what's most valued to you. And now that you've got those responses in your head, what are you going to do about it? And how can you be a multiplier in each other's lives? Thank you.
Amazing.